Hello, boxing fans, and welcome to the Boxing Scene. On today's show, my guest is Miss Jean Dancy Monroe, wife of former heavyweight contender Marty Monroe. We'll talk to Jean about what it was like being married to Marty, her part in his career as manager and promoter, and we'll also take a look at that fiasco last week in Atlantic City with Riddick Bowe and Elijah Tillery. You're watching the Boxing Scene. I'm Norman Carter. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Well, how are you doing, Jean? It's been such a long time. I haven't seen you in quite a while, and welcome to the Boxing Scene.
Thank you.
We have to start, unfortunately, on somewhat of a sad note, but you know, in talking to you, you said that you're not going through any period of mourning. Marty Monroe, your beloved husband, just recently passed. You were known throughout the boxing circuit as the lady manager, and the lady who probably might have caused a little bit of stir around the male in the boxing game. Tell us a little something about Marty and what it was like, you know, being that close to Marty.
Well, one of the things I'd like to stress is this. I'm not grieving. I'm not sad. I'm not depressed. I'm none of those things. And the reason that I'm none of those things is because, unlike those who watched his boxing career, they didn't know very much about him as the person, the husband. And as a husband, he couldn't have been better. I mean, he was a champion husband. And we were very, very, very happy. And I lived a dream with Marty. I really did. And because of that, I'm able to be happy when I think of him and not sad. So that's why I'm happy.
Well, I tell you, you certainly should be commended. Marty was a gentleman that I knew personally. He was well respected in the community. What was it like being the wife of a fighter?
Well, it was exciting because for me, unlike some women, you know, most women say, well, it's a brutal sport and, you know, I don't want to watch that and I'm not interested. I love, love, love boxing. And I've loved boxing before I ever met Marty. So it was, to me, a match made in heaven. I mean, here I am, it's my favorite sport, and suddenly I'm married to a boxer. Exactly. And I mean, I loved watching him box, so that was terribly exciting to me. And it was just, it was wonderful. But once he asked me to become his manager, you know, I did receive a bit of opposition from some of the wonderful boxing men, and they were sometimes very brutal and, well, brutally honest, as a matter of fact. I can think of one in particular. I won't call his name. I suppose he won't like that, but I had a meeting with him one day, and I walked in the office, and we were talking, and everything was going fine, you know, and Marty was on the outside, and he said, well, I just want you to know that I'm not taking your word on anything you say, and when you finish talking, I'm going to go out in the hallway and ask Marty what's going on. I said, well, why don't you do it? Ask him now. You know, so he went and he says, Marty, I don't know what to believe. She says this and she says that. And Marty says, you believe whatever she says, you know, and he walked away. And of course, I just loved it. So, you know, some of them weren't that receptive.
Right. Marty had a very successful career up until the point when he retired. I think the highlight of his career would probably be when he fought
Eddie the Animal Lopez.
Eddie the Animal Lopez, right?
Without
A fight that I was there. I had an opportunity to see that fight.
Wasn't it exciting?
And you could not have asked for more action from round 1 to round 10.
Total action.
Exactly.
I mean, I was ecstatic from the minute the bell rang. But one of the things that I think people may not know is that at the time that Marty had to end that phase of his career, we were meeting with Don King, talking about a possible championship. First, a fight with Michael Dokes. We were talking about that first. And then we were meeting, talking about a possible fight with Larry Holmes. And Marty and I, you know, went home one day and he sneezed, believe it or not. Man was never knocked down, never knocked out in the ring. He sneezed one time, caught a nerve. And when he went to the doctor said, Marty, we must prepare to give you surgery right away because the nerve was such that it had already begun to do damage. It had started to numb the left side, so he had to have surgery. And as a result of that, you know, at the time he was number 4 in the world, he had to be out of boxing for a year. And at the end of that year, as you know, I had been his manager for that time, and at the end of that year, he, you know, wanted to go back and he had to see, you know, do I have anything left? And he had to just see. So I was on the phone calling the usual people, Don King, Bob Arum, and everybody who listened, and asking, you know, for a safe opponent for my husband who had had back surgery, but nobody would give me one. I sort of think they were, well, maybe they weren't trying to squeeze me out, but they wouldn't give me a safe opponent. I mean, they'd say, well, this man was #4 in the world, and you want me to have him fight this guy? No, we won't have it. And then one of the other things was they wanted, one of them wanted to sign him to a lengthy contract just in case he had something left. So as the time went on, Marty started to ask me, Jean, if you were my promoter, would you let me have the opponent that I want? And I said, well, of course, you know I would. And then he said, and would you let me fight in L.A.? And I said, well, Marty, you know I would. Of course, if I were the promoter, you could have anybody you want. You could fight in L.A., you could train wherever, and you could do whatever. And he said, well, isn't it clear to you what you have to do? And I said, no, what do I have to do? Become a promoter. And I said, no, it isn't clear. And I really didn't want to do it. I mean, it was not something that I was interested in doing, and not something that I would have ever considered doing without his prodding, pushing, and actually shoving me to do it, you know. So after a while, you know, he said, just find out how to become one. So I just became one.
So actually going into the Greg Page fight, he had came off a year of inactivity?
No. Before the Page fight, there had not been any inactivity. But prior to the Page fight, I'm glad you brought that fight up,
okay,
he had started to have more severe back problems.
Okay.
Actually, Marty had always had back problems. And I'm going to say something here today that I'd never said publicly before and had asked him not to say. He had already had 2 back operations when he became #4 in the world. And I used to tell him, you know, don't say that, because you don't want somebody to look at you, you know, big, handsome guy, and say, well, that's the guy that had 2 back surgeries, because, you know, subconsciously we might have looked at him and thought of him as, you know, not physically fit or physically capable.
Right.
So I used to tell him, don't admit that. And he always had problems physically.
So in other words, he was always fighting in pain.
Yes,
this was
he
a normal
always
part of
had
it.
problems physically. He actually used to crawl sometimes, you know, and I would help him to go to the chiropractor to manipulate the back and get the nerve release. He could never ever train the way most boxers are blessed to do, because he always had pain.
Okay.
And prior to the Page fight, you know how they warm up and they jump around. He wasn't even able to do that. He was so he was in such pain that he couldn't jump around. And that was the first time that I asked him to please not take the fight. And then he said, Page can't knock me out, and everything is said. And you know how boxers are. They're sort of bullheaded, you know.
Well, also, once the promotional thing have gotten in full swing,
yeah,
sometimes it's hard to pull out.
And it was televised,
right,
as
exactly.
I think you remember, on CBS.
Certainly,
He wouldn't pull out, you know.
Now, the fight that he had with, what's the gentleman's name that called Marty a name that we won't mention on the air?
Scott Ledoux.
Scott Ledoux.
Hi, Scott.
What was his conditioning like going into that fight?
Prior to Marty fighting Scott Ledoux, we had trained in Muhammad Ali's camp, and he had excellent conditioning, probably some of the best conditioning that he'd ever had. And, well, Scott called him names, and those awful names, you know. And they had written things on the dressing room walls, and for the first time in Marty's career, he was angry.
What prompted Scott Ledoux to even want to behave like that? That was just his own inhibition or whatever?
Well, you know, I don't think well, I have no idea how he behaved prior to that time, but I somehow didn't think that he had done that before. I don't know, but I don't know. You
think maybe he might have been doing that to try to get some kind of edge or try to throw Marty off?
Well, yes, and it worked. It really worked, because Marty was very angry, and they had a press conference, and Marty and Scott actually almost got into a fight for real.
Oh.
This was not show. I mean, Marty was very interested in taking him out right there. And I'm saying, oh, darling, please. I mean, can't you wait? Get paid at least. And I'll get him now. You know, he didn't want to wait. But so it was real. It was real animosity between them. So when he went in the ring, he was very angry. And he didn't fight his fight. As you know, I watched him train every day, so I knew what his game plan was. He deviated from that. He was supposed to have jabbed and, you know, done.
Yeah, right.
At one time, Marty was an excellent, excellent, excellent boxer. I mean, God, he boxed beautifully.
I've seen him, and I know what you're talking about.
So,
I saw him, you know, in the early stages of his career, and I saw what was there.
But I don't think the public at large got a chance to really see that part of him, because, as you know, Joe Frazier was his manager at that time.
And he was kept inactive.
He was very inactive, and by the time he became, you know, one of the top 10 contenders, he had already begun to have really serious back problems again. So they never got a chance to see the Marty that I fell in love with in the ring.
So at what point did you and Marty finally decide that this was too painful, there was no way possible that he could continue with his career because of all the physical difficulties he was having?
Well, I promoted a couple of fights for him, and downtown at the Hyatt Regency. And we looked at it, and it was apparent to me right away, really after the first fight, that he'd better not do that.
Was it also apparent to him?
Not as apparent as it was to me. You know how boxers are. I mean, you know, well, Gene, you know, give me another chance,
I
baby.
just had an off night.
You know, let me fight again. And I said, well, you know, darling, maybe you better think twice about this. And he said, well, let me try it again. So we tried it again. And then he looked at it and he said,
maybe it's time.
you know, maybe I'd better let it go.
Right.
But it wasn't very painful for him, though, to let it go, the way it is with some boxers, you
Right,
know.
that's the question I was going to get to next.
It was
because, you know, as we know, it's so difficult for fighters to leave that sport and just go into something else, because it's been so much a part of them since childhood. It wasn't.
It had been a part of his life since he was 5 years old, as a matter of fact. But it wasn't painful for him to leave it, because Marty was very enthusiastic about many things. Boxing was only one of them. So he had many ideas. I mean, the man had such vision. I had to try to run to catch up with him. And, you know, there's another thing I'd like to say, too. Because, you know, hearing people talk about us and stuff, and some of the things that I heard people say, you know, they would always say, well, you know, his wife has all these great ideas, and his wife this and his wife that. And the truth of the matter is, that wasn't true. Marty had the great ideas. I didn't have any ideas.
Okay, he conceived the ideas.
He
you
conceived
just
the ideas, and
through.
I followed through. But I did not come up with any of the ideas. But people, for some reason, tried to give me more credit than they gave him. And, you know, she thought of this and she thought of that. I did not. He thought of all the ideas. I never thought of any of them.
Okay, we're just going to touch briefly on you now. Outside of boxing, you know, you've been involved in other jobs. Let's put it like that.
I had 102 careers. No, I'm 102. Let me see. When Marty met me, I was a professional model, an actress. I taught English for a while. I was a real estate broker. I've done many things.
Okay.
You know,
and
I'm a writer.
What I heard about your background, that you were involved in the real estate business. That's, you know, the area that I was keyed in on. And was Marty also involved with you in that?
Well, I'll give you a great example of the way our marriage worked and the way I sat one day and I said, you know, Marty, I think it'd be a great idea if I became a real estate agent. Don't you think that would be exciting? And he said, no, it would be exciting if my wife became a real estate broker. And I said, but Marty, I said, I can take one course and become an agent. And because I had a degree, you know, I could become a broker without having worked in it before. That was how that worked. And I said, but I'll have to take 8 college courses in order to become a broker. Well, my wife will take 8 courses. My wife is so smart, she can't just be an agent. My wife has to be a broker. So he pushed and he pushed and he pushed. And I became a broker. So. But after I had worked at it for about a year, and it was fairly interesting, but not quite as interesting as I had anticipated. Honestly, I mean, after boxing, it just,
it just didn't have the same.
It was okay,
right.
But it wasn't. I was not stuck with it like I was glue or anything. But Marty had been approached by someone who asked if they could purchase our story together. Our love story and our...
I heard something about that.
They wanted to do a movie.
Right.
So, again, Marty said, Gene, you know, somebody wants to do a movie, so you write a synopsis about us, and I did that. And then he insisted that I write the script. Mind you, I had never written a script before, but that didn't matter. Marty said, my wife can get a book, and my wife can read the book, and she can find out how to write a script. So I got a book, read it, found out how to write a script, came out of the real estate office for a year, and I wrote the script. And, you know, I've not done anything really with it because the man who wanted to buy it wanted to change so many things so drastically. And because it's true, I couldn't allow that. And I didn't, of course, write nudity in, but I mean, it's a love story, you know. We could just, you'd be amazed at the ideas they had. The love scenes that they wanted to take place in the ring. I mean, since this was a true story, I couldn't go for that, so I had to turn that down. And you know, we could have used the money too, but you know, money can't always be first. No, money can't.
Where is Jean at this point in her life in terms
this point in my life?
What her focuses are, and where are you planning on, you know, taking your life at this point?
Well, I had made the statement to Marty prior to him leaving and going to heaven. I said, darling, never again will I involve myself with boxing. I mean, I don't ever want to do another thing, but I think that something has happened to me subconsciously now that he isn't here physically. I think I'm having a love affair with boxing again, you know. I mean, as you well know, I mean,
certainly
you've been
am aware
so
of
nice
what it's
to
like.
me. You brought me tapes and stuff. I mean, I'm just having this wonderful love affair with the boxing world, period, you know, and all the boxers. I mean, to me, all of a sudden, they seem like, and they really always did seem like family, but they seem like more family now, you know. It's like when I see them, I see two fighters stand face to face, I still get that rush when the instructions are going forth. I mean, I could just scream, and oh, and God, when they're walking, you know, making that walk to the ring, all of that just sends me all the way out. And I mean,
I'd like to ask you a couple questions. There's some fighters throughout the years that have held, you know, a certain place in certain people's minds. Who are the fighters that you admired?
Well, first, my big baby, Marty Monroe.
Okay, first and foremost.
I fell in love with him outside of the ring and then inside of the ring, and I can honestly say that my biggest thrill in life was when I saw him fight in person for the first time. I mean, I was just... they almost had to carry me out. And aside from Marty, I'd say, without question, Muhammad Ali. I mean, I absolutely love him. And then...
and you had the opportunity to meet him, too.
I loved him even better meeting him. I mean, we had an instant rapport. And at the risk of sounding terribly egotistical, I must say that he reminded me very much of myself. I mean, he really did. That's what the attraction was. Okay. And Tommy Hearns. I mean, the Hitman has just... I mean, wow. I mean, I love. Well,
I tell you, they don't get much better than those two. I mean, I think they're, you know, generally speaking, a lot of boxing fans like Tommy Hearns because number one, he always gives you your money's worth.
Always.
In winning or in defeat.
Always.
And he's always a very humble individual.
I like that too.
Yeah. As you know, he's the current light heavyweight champion. And you know, we would both like to see him make some money, but also we'd like to see him walk away before it's too late. You know, there's not a whole lot more that I can say. I really appreciate you coming by, you know, and being on the show. The fight that everybody wanted to see, obviously, was the Tyson-Holyfield fight. That fight, as you know, has been canceled. Evander Holyfield now is scheduled to fight Francesco Damiani in Atlantic City at the Omni. A fight that I'm sure that if it was in Las Vegas, maybe we both could probably go and check that out.
Well, it sounds like it might be interesting. I hope that the outcome is favorable to Holyfield.
Well, like I told you before, they made sure they picked somebody who was relatively safe and somewhat marketable.
You know how it is in boxing. That puncher always has a puncher's chance.
Well, that's true. I mean,
discount that.
Buster Douglas proved it to us all.
Buster showed us unequivocally that can happen to anybody.
I think that's why we love boxing, because the unexpected is always... You never know what is going to happen, you know.
And I like Mike, too. I like watching Mike.
Mike Tyson?
Yeah, but I like boxers better than I like
as opposed
punchers.
To sluggers and brawlers.
Give me a boxer any day.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our show for today. I'd like to thank Jean Dancy Monroe for coming by, and I certainly hope that you enjoyed the interview that we did. I will hope that in the future we'll get to see some more of Jean, as Jean will also be bringing some footage of her interview that she did with George Foreman. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. I'm Norman Carter, and until next week, keep punching.